Hello. Howdy. Welcome to another show. Hopefully, all of you are doing fine. Anybody that's catching me at this kind of unusual time for me, I have the day off today, so I figured, hey, why not make a video and review some of this stuff? I wasn't originally going to do a review of this particular video. It's about 30 minutes long. It's a conversation between Mac, used to go by the name Mac Gruber, and thus the thumbnail I used. He is a recent convert he was a recent convert to kind of a deistic, maybe just kind of a convert to the kind of Darth Dawkins ultimate being kind of thing, and then has I think gradually accepted most of the rest of the kind of evangelical stuff. But he's a fan of Darth Dawkins-style apologetics, kind of a fellow traveler now with them. And he got into a Clubhouse discussion with quite a few of the usuals that kind of hang out there. Tom Rabbit, Jack Angstrike, Danny goes by the name Phil Talk. He has a YouTube channel. And there are a few other people in there that I know. And Floyd FP, I think, is in there briefly too. So they got into a discussion on this, and it kind of goes back and forth. He's sort of ping ponging around with everybody. But it's kind of worth going through. There's the first initial 10 minutes. I might speed it up just a hair to kind of get through it. The first initial 10 minutes is kind of everybody kind of feeling the discussion out a little bit. There's some things we're talking about there, but it really kind of kicks up in the second half. And that's probably the part that's the most interesting, but some of it needs context, and that's where I think the rest of it comes in. So I want to say hello to a few people in the side chat. Gray Knight, you were first. Good to see you. AJ, good to see you. Christopher Mowdy, nice to see you. Carlton Winston, hello, hello. Maya Atkinson, always good to see you. Red Fang, what's up? Michael Deaton, what's up? Mighty Sarlacc, hello. Scott Duke, hello there. I'm glad you're alive and streaming once more. Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to do this before JL Warren goes live and before Answers in Atheism does anything, if he's doing anything today. Alex Baptista, hello, hello. James Henry, Maria McIntyre, hello. Daisy, Mythic Roxas, and Daniel Cooper. Welcome to all of you. And Mischievous One. Yeah, doing a rare one. I had today off. I had some medical things going on earlier this morning. I had taken the day just to make sure I got all that stuff done, and a lot of it got done earlier than I thought. So what better way to it's a nice afternoon. I'm not going to spend too much time doing this one, I don't think. But I figured I'd cover this one before I get into another one that's going to be coming up close. And actually, Christopher Mowdy, who's in the live chat, I reached out to him. There is a new one. I think it's on Clubhouse Debates or Capturing Debates. I think it's on Clubhouse Debates. Yeah, it is. It's a discussion. It's about a 30-minute clip. It's a discussion between Darth Dawkins and a guy named Hank from Canada. And Darth Dawkins gets into a topic I've never heard him use before. I was actually talking with my brother about it yesterday, and I asked him, I'm like, have you ever heard this kind of technique or terminology used by Darth in the past? And he said he'd never had, and he's been watching all these YouTube videos even longer than I have. So it's pretty interesting. So I'd reached out to Mowdy because he's throwing around some terminology that I thought might have a little bit of an overlap, a little bit of equivocation with some psychological terminology. It definitely is not clear when he's using it, but that one's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to doing that one. But this one, basically, everybody in this particular one does most of the commenting. It's kind of self-explanatory. There's just a few things I'll point out in it. But let's get going on it. Daisy asks, Jefferson, can I respectfully ask if you are taking chemotherapy? I wouldn't answer that question if I. No, it's fine. No, nothing that serious. I do not have anything that serious going on. I have a variety of things that have kind of caught up to me from years of being poor and not having health insurance, and now I have a decent job with good health insurance, and I'm trying to get caught up on some things that started off as annoyances and have kind of like just sort of snowballed into kind of bigger ones now that I'm in my 40s. And so things are creaky and achy and shit like that. It's basically like you get to find out, what your body is good at. I've gotten some really good medical news lately, and then I've gotten some not so great medical news. So, but that's how it goes. So yeah, no, it's not that. It's just lots of physiotherapy and things like that. I may be looking at surgery at the end of, the middle or the end of next month, which could put me out of commission for a little while. Not sure if that's going to put me out of commission in terms of my YouTube channel, but it will. It is going to make some changes. So anyway, that aside, let me see here. Yep, I don't see anything else yet in here, but let me see. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. So I've got about 45 people here waiting and watching. I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Let me get rid of some of this stuff going on here. All right, so let's get into this. So again, just to set this up, this is somebody's Clubhouse room, and Mac is in there. Mac is the one who's sort of the newly, enervated and he's an energized fundamentalist, and he's going to be taking on all comers, and that's what he's trying to do. Yeah, Hog Tyson, Jefferson Spanish guy, getting old sucks. Currently, I have tennis elbow in both elbows. I don't play tennis. Yeah, that's the worst thing. It's like, how did I get tendinopathy in a body part that I don't use that often? Like, and then they find out, like, no, it's not wearing out. It's just always inflamed. Like, cool. Yeah. Well, so that line from what Malcolm McDowell's character in Star Trek, time is the fire in which we all burn. God, that guy was depressed. Whew. Anyway, I'm going to get into some movie tangents if I keep that up. All right, here we go. So Mac talking with this particular group, he's kind of like taking on everybody. And I don't think he's got any allies in this particular room. So this gets kind of fun. Also, thank you, Simus, and welcome, Simus. Always good to see you.
Mac, why can't you answer my question? Right, you're saying that God is, the Christian God specifically, is like logically necessary. So I'm just asking what the logical contradiction would be if I say that the Christian God or God doesn't exist. I don't get it.
Because you're making a claim. Claims require intelligibility, and the source for intelligibility
right,
is
so you just don't have a fucking argument, right?
Right?
Yeah, so you just don't have a fucking argument is what you're saying, right? You're just a fucking dumbass.
I do have an argument.
I should warn everybody watching this one, and I am going to speed it up just a touch. If anybody finds this, I'm not going to speed it up a lot, but 1.25 should probably help us get through some of the initial stuff. Most of these people have had encounters before. Most of them have their own. They're already starting to develop. I think you can probably tell some dysfunctional. What's the word I'm looking for? Openly hostile tendencies towards each other. Yeah. And because of that, I'm sure most of these guys have probably butted heads in the past. So kind of already seeing that. The interesting thing about this one is that Jack Angstreich shows that Jack Angstreich does not get angry in this particular one. He stays, because I think he realizes with Mac it's not particularly worth it. And I'm not exactly sure why Jack stays. Like, sometimes he's as cool as a cucumber, and other times he will just blow up at somebody. And I think I have an idea of what makes him mad, but I'm not sure. I don't know Jack very well. Anyway, but so some of this is some of this gets a little trolly. There's some people throwing in comments and stuff like that. So if you don't like that, I appreciate that. Some of this is I think initially it's kind of the nature of Clubhouse discussions. It's one of the reasons why I take Clubhouse in very small dosages, because if there's a lot of kind of crosstalk and a lot of this kind of schoolyard kind of shit happening, I usually just tune right out. Like I couldn't care less. So, but anyway, let's see. Some decent points will start getting made here soon.
Oh, then just give the fucking argument.
God is necessary for intelligibility. There exists intelligibility.
No, I'm asking for the argument for premise 1.
It was revealed that way. You just don't like that response.
Yeah, you're just a waste of time.
Claim. The self-attesting claim.
Okay, so it would be a contradiction if you denied that, right? It would be contradictory to say that I don't exist or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Why don't you ask fuck off.
Eli
Ayala. Why don't you ask Eli Ayala, who's literally a professional presuppositional
What a fucking
apologist.
dumbass.
Oh, you're not brave enough. That's why.
That's funny. They asked Eli Ayala if he could.
They did.
Yeah, you're probably in a crowded mall, and he couldn't understand anything you were saying.
No, you haven't seen the video?
No, there's a video on Yeah, that video exists. It's quite long.
Yeah, I like that. He takes that cheap shot at Jack Angstreich. Angstreich lives. I think Angstreich lives in New York City. Most of the time, it seems like he's like during a commute or he's near a deli or something like that. Cities are loud, so yeah, he's trying to say, "Well, you're always in the middle of a shopping mall." Like, no, he's probably somewhere in Manhattan.
Long actually, and he actually ends the conversation saying that he'll have to get back with us. And of all the atheist rooms he's ever been in, this was one of the nicest, and he was very appreciative of our input. But he had no answer.
For like evidence of the first premise?
An argument for the first premise with a transcendental argument for God.
Oh, the Bible. I just solved it for you. There you go.
It's not question begging.
Again, it's not.
Like the one thing that Mac has gotten into is being able to throw out these kind of pat like responses. Oh, the Bible, there, I just solved it for you. But the problem with that is that depending on the type of Christian apologist that you talk to, well, actually, I'm going to hold off on that point and wait because this comes up again and it gets kind of weird. Mac is kind of bridging this kind of gap where he'll talk about the Bible as if it's just like a novel, like it's one single narrative, kind of like the way Matt Slick does. But Matt Slick, I don't know if Matt Slick often will do this, but other apologists will try to they'll pivot. They're like, well, there's the narrative as Christians understand it, where you can talk about the Bible as if it's just a book, cut one story cover to cover. But then there's the parts where, if you atheists want to point out a contradiction in the Psalms, let's say, well, let's talk about what kind of genre that particular ancient Israelite narrative is. Then all of a sudden it's a compendium of different books with different genres and different authors, and all of a sudden historical scholarship makes sense to them. It makes sense and it applies until they just want to use this pat answer like, well, the Bible says so, and then all of a sudden it's uniform in nature, consistent from Genesis to Revelation.
Question begging because it's true. God revealed the Bible.
Answer Tom's question.
I did. He just doesn't like my answer.
Answer it responsively.
Well, if the Bible is true, then God's real, right?
Yes.
All right, so isn't that question begging? You're going to have a conclusion with God, and the Bible's true. The conclusion that God is real entails that the Bible is true.
Yes.
So it's question begging, right?
Well, they reinforce each other.
Yeah, sure they do. But the problem is that the one assumes the other one without actually making an argument for it. So, which is what Tom's getting at, and Mac's missing.
The Bible attests to God's realness.
Well, if you want to call it reinforcing, yeah, I'll call it question.
The Bible doesn't attest to I don't understand why these guys can do this kind of stuff. They can sort of get this kind of thing where it's like, okay, just because you believe in something doesn't mean that it's actually true. Or just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean it's actually not true, right? You'll hear some kind of equivalent to this, like they get it, right? But this idea, like, okay, well, the Bible makes the claim for God, therefore it's necessarily true. How are you doing? Like, why are you doing that, right? We know that the Bible is written by people, and we know that it makes claims about God and about Jesus and about lots of other things, right? And some of them, I think, a lot of Christians might be surprised. Those, especially in the New Testament books, might not be making the claims they grew up thinking they make, right? Like the kinds of claims that pastors have described them as making, right? Some of those messages have been massaged or misshaped and edited and changed ever so slightly, thanks to the ambiguities of the Gospels and the other books of the New Testament in the English translation. So, that being said, this notion that, like, well, the Bible says it, therefore it's fine. It's like, no, you have an account for it. They have no problem doing this, and this is going to come up later with the Quran, right? Just because the Quran says something, it doesn't follow from that Allah actually exists. To which anyone's reaction should be exactly right. And then you can just stop talking about that and start talking about the weather or politics or sports or, whatever.
Right.
Again, like, you're right for 99% of things, but like God being the supernatural creator who transcends all of this, like all of the logic that he instantiated.
Would you say that?
So does does he instantiate logic, or is he logic? Like, I guess I'm a little unclear where Mac's going with that. That's a little problematic. He transcends the logic that which he instantiates. Okay.
Would you accept the line of reasoning? Would you accept the line of reasoning that God doesn't exist because the God delusion says it?
No, because the God delusion wasn't revealed by God. So, like, you can't say that God doesn't exist because the Bible was written by God, and we have the Bible. Well, it wasn't written, but it was inspired.
But the claim, like, I don't know how Mac has missed this part, but this is like, sort of like, I mean, these kinds of discussions I thought were over with, right? That, well, the Bible says, well, we know that the Bible is the word of God because it's right there in the Bible that it's the word of God, right? Like, it's written right there. And it's like, yeah, that's not necessarily the case. I'm kind of surprised that Mac is doing it, because this is pretty, I don't know, like, who he's been talking to in some of his the newer Christian circles on Clubhouse, but they probably should have prepared him a little bit better for this thing.
Inspired by God.
To say that the Bible is written by God kind of presupposes God's existence, right? Because there is a God that has been written, a God that has written the Bible, right? Okay, so then now we're questioning the assumption there, right? So go ahead.
I'm not seeing the problem.
No, it's a question. I'm not pointing out a problem. I'm asking a question.
What was your question?
You said that God wrote the Bible, correct?
Well, for all intents and purposes, yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. Okay, so now if that's true, that means that there must, in the first place, be a God to be able to write such a thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the assumption that we're pointing out for you to defend.
It's not an assumption. It's knowledge.
Okay, so exactly. What makes it knowledge rather than an assumption?
One, because he revealed it. Two, he reveals himself in natural revelation. Like the fact that we could even be on this platform together and I can understand what you're saying. Like, God is a guarantor and sustainer of intelligibility and things that are possible and impossible.
Okay, you're saying that without God, this conversation is not possible, right?
Yes.
He's going to regret saying that.
Okay, so what makes that true? What's the justification for that?
Because you need God for intelligibility. Otherwise, nothing has any grounding.
That's just repeating yourself. You're just repeating yourself.
Okay, well, then you know my answer and you can shut up.
Justify.
Yeah, I can shut up. You're so triggered, man. The point is that you don't have a really good answer, right? You just said that there's intelligibility in the conversation, so you need God, and I asked you why, and then you said, well, God, you need God for intelligibility, and you sound so stupid, and you know it, and that's why you got angry and told me to shut up.
No, part of presuppositionalism is saying that because atheists don't have grounding for anything, they should shut their mouths or provide a worldview that does account for intelligibility.
Yeah, but all you have to do is just make a claim. Other people, like, whatever Mac is going with this, that no, that's not what's going on. Is that they can't ground intelligibility, so they should shut their mouths until they can. Like, okay, but the issue here is that, okay, if you're pitting, especially the way Christians, these apologists like to do it, they like to bifurcate reality into two distinct realms: those that believe in God and those that don't, right? And the ones that do believe in God, they can rely on God to be the grounding for all that is, especially things like rationality and things like that. Sure, they could be wrong about certain things, but you know what? When they're right because of God. The problem is they never make the distinction that when they're wrong, it's also because of God, but that's an entailment they don't want to touch. But for the non-believer hasn't come up with anything like, you can't ground it, like you got nothing, right? But if a non-believer says, okay, well, why don't I just like stipulate to something like the cosmos or something like that, or a pantheistic origin for the universe or something like that. We know what happens when that happens, when that comes up, when somebody tries that shtick, especially if they're trying that on Darth Dawkins. Darth Dawkins immediately shifts into atheist mode and starts asking the kinds of questions that a lot of atheists ask of him and his stipulated beliefs about God. Like, how do you know that? Where did you get that from? And, well, that's just a claim. Do you have an argument to support that particular claim? Are you just going to throw out more claims and think that because you have a collection of unsupported claims, the weight of them taken together is somehow going to equal to a possible argument? And even if it does lead to a possible argument, just because an argument is successful or fails does not mean that the thing it's arguing for or against is necessarily the case. So, right? Like, I mean, and what's sad is that Mac has kind of bought into this. He's bought into that part of the rhetoric where he's just like, yeah, I'm convinced, you guys don't have, you don't have a leg to stand on. Like, okay, but the way that you're trying to establish this lack of foundational, whatever, for, this lack of grounding for whatever, this applies to Christians too. Christians just make the claim like, oh, well, I know that this stuff it can be backed up because Jesus. All right. And when you ask them how they get there, what's their rationale for that? The rationale is not great, right? The weird thing is that they don't just say, look, there's a collection of stories out there, including the Bible. And also we have this thing where people are just kind of motivated to believe in gods. So I take it to be that there's some truth to these, right? Generally, some of these supernatural claims. And I find the stories in the Bible to be uniquely compelling. And I'm convinced that there's something to this, that they're true, mostly true, all true, whatever, right? And I do think that Christians accept most of the stuff in the Bible. They accept it kind of provisionally. There's certain things about the Bible that they do not believe literally. Like when they read that portion of the Bible where God shows up at the end to kill Moses, you will, if you bring that up to most Christians, you will then see them start all of a sudden embracing postmodernist literary criticisms and historical scholarship theories to justify the way it was translated, the language that was used. Oh, it was this kind of it was, all of a sudden it's about semantics and how it was translated from here, and then it was in the Septuagint, back and forth. But the one thing that you can take into account, like, so it's a tiny claim like that has to be just obsessed over, right, with historical scholarship. They accept the complications and the complexity and the nuance there, but then in these kinds of conversations, they'll leave this kind of like prattling on to somebody who's relatively new, like Mac, who's kind of excited about this and he wants to pwn some atheists, and he's just going to talk about the Bible like it's just a thing. And the basic claims that Christians make about their religion are just, they're just matter of fact. Like Mac acts like if you just open up the Bible, you start reading some of the stuff that he's pushing out, and you don't get that from the Bible. If you start your journey in Christianity by reading the Bible, you will arrive at a very different place than if you start your Christian journey in a church. I know from experience because I started my life being raised in churches. So my initial impression of Christianity was very different than when I started finding out, like, oh, you can get textbooks on this from historical scholars who explain how these books work and what their authors might have meant in the historical context, and new research on this archaeologically and otherwise, and it changes everything. So I just feel bad. I think people need to pitch in and buy Mac an introductory textbook to either the Old Testament or New, or Bart Ehrman's textbook on the Bible, because he's got like one big survey course on it.
But spoiler alert, when you do provide that worldview, that source of intelligibility will be indistinguishable from the Christian God. So it basically is the Christian God.
Yeah. So Eli said something like that too, and he actually agreed with us that if I'm unable to give a proper grounding for intelligibility, it wouldn't follow necessarily that therefore Christianity is true. Do you disagree with Eli?
No.
Okay, so then that was a bunch of bullshit you just uttered then.
Jeez,
Danny. It's curious that no atheist has provided grounds for intelligibility.
Curious in what sense? Nothing turns on it. We could all be moronic and not be able to ground our intelligibility. It doesn't mean that therefore Christianity is true.
But the Christians can. At least they have a model. You don't.
They have an attempt, and it's not it's not a model. It's just a stipulation. They just stipulate that it has. And here's a big problem that I have for this, and it's part of some arguments that I've been reading lately, is this notion that what's being thrown out to us as skeptics, right, is that, and I think it's done intentionally to kind of pull like a little bit of a switcheroo, is the idea like, well, you atheists cannot explain, you can't provide logically sufficient explanations for concrete things, for concrete entities. They're like, well, why are there rocks? Why are there trees? Why is there a planet? All this kind of stuff, right? So that's usually thrown out, right? And so, all right, if the appeal is to figure out what explains logically, what provides logically sufficient explanations for concrete things, almost all of them rely on other concrete things. Those are just kind of the breaks, right? And it seems to be the case, it's pretty well accepted amongst philosophers, that you don't have anything that's a concrete thing that's self-explanatory, right? Almost anything, if there is some kind of principle behind it, like it can be explained by some logically sufficient reason, then that reason or that explanation is going to be another concrete fact. But when they wind it all the way back to God, right, all of a sudden God then breaks that cycle for them, right? The appeal is to figure out the logically sufficient explanation for concrete things, contingent things that are concrete, right? And they want to wind it back to a concrete thing that is the foundation for all these other contingent concrete things, but it in and of itself has no logically sufficient explanation. It simply is. So if they try to stipulate that it's just a brute fact, well, then they've kind of given up everything, right? Because if you're willing to accept that there's at least one concrete entity that doesn't require a logically sufficient explanation, you've kind of violated the principle just once. You don't have to keep doing that for every fact, but even just doing that once sort of violates it. So what was the motivation to attempt to try to justify the notion that every contingent thing must have a logically sufficient explanation in it? Well, if it follows that that is the case, and every logically and it turns out that every logically sufficient explanation for one concrete thing is another preceding concrete thing, it kind of follows that if you've got this one foundational thing at the beginning, which is still a concrete, it can't be an abstract because it needs to be causal, it needs to have agency. It's going to be a concrete thing, but it doesn't have a logically sufficient explanation. It's just a brute fact. Okay. Well, if you're willing to concede brute facts, at least in at that origin, I'm not exactly sure what was motivating you to the rest of this kind of stuff. I don't know if any of these Christians have actually reflected on this long enough to realize that that's kind of what they're doing. I don't think they care. I think that part of the precept sales pitch is to put this thing out there that epistemologically causes a little bit of vertigo in skeptics, and then they can try to appeal to this, like, well, if you want to be certain that a lamp is a lamp when you say it's a lamp, then you have to concede that Jesus makes everything so. Otherwise, without Jesus, the lamp could be a red balloon or a hamster, right? Everything just descends into sort of a Mad Magazine level of chaos, and that doesn't follow either. But that seems to be the picture that they want to point out. Yeah, that's enough for that kind of rant. So.
Okay, but that's what we're asking about, right? Whether you can, and you haven't provided anything. You just provided something like an assumption or something.
It's a good thing. It's a good.
How far? We're 7 minutes in. I will try to ramble less. Hey, welcome, Justin. And hello, 8:30 to Awesome.
Thing though that we both have the necessity of referencing the necessity of God and the fact that the Bible was revealed by God.
See, when you say it's necessary, you're saying it's a logical
I'm not listening to Jack Angstrike. I'm not listening to Jack Angstrike because when I was speaking in my car, everyone shouted at me and made me and put me back down.
No, it was because your audio was fucking shit.
When Jack Angstrike
no, your audio was
except
fucking
for the last
shit,
like 20 minutes.
That's
Yeah, now they're going to get into some meta stuff. So, yeah. Hogtie writes, 1, they declare without argument that atheists simply cannot have a theory of grounding. And 2, they claim that God accounts for things when God does no such thing. Yeah. And if he does, and that's when they put the pressure on him. Like, okay, let's just concede that God does account for something. Or in the case of Christians, he accounts for everything. How? Right. But again, I think part of the weakness to that is that the reason that they're looking for God as an account for everything isn't because of the how, it's because of the why, right? They're concerned that all this stuff could be here, as once somebody put it recently, by accident, which makes no sense. Like, no. We're here by accident as it is. We live in a fallen state and we're all sinful and we require the salvation of God in the form of a human avatar. We're already here accidentally, that, that kind of has it built into it that there was an intention and we were, and then everything turned to shit. Unless you believe that the fallen state of man is intentional, which is consistent with the salvific narrative and the gospel initiative, Jesus is eternal and all that shit. But yeah, see, I'm rambling again. We're just getting into that, like the theological and apologetic, wormhole.
Why? That's why you removed.
He's always at a crowded amusement park. He's always at a crowded amusement park or a restaurant.
We moved you because your audio was fucking shit.
when you say it's necessary, you're saying it's a logical contradiction to deny it, right? And that's the whole issue, is that the presuppositionalist claim is not the claim that every atheist I've ever talked to and every non-Christian I've ever talked to hasn't been able to present me with a satisfactory model, right? It's the claim that it wouldn't be possible for them to do so. And that means you have to show that there's a contradiction that's entailed by denying Christianity. That was essentially what we were asking Eli Ayala to support. And that's essentially what we were asking, what what's his name was asking Darth Dawkins in that video to support, right? Because they say the first premise is something like knowledge and intelligibility are possible if and only if the Christian God exists, right? And so to say, well, the support for that claim is the impossibility of the contrary is just to repeat the claim. So in fact, to support it, you'd have to show how it is impossible, which is to say what contradiction would be entailed by denying it, right? And that's what we've been telling you from the outset, right? Is no presuppositionalist has an argument like that. And the reason is because it's not the case that God is a logically necessary being, that the Christian God is a logically necessary being. You can't derive the Christian God from the axioms of logic, right? There's never going to be an argument like that. That's why Darth Dawkins has no argument. That's
Jack, are you done preaching? Is your sermon over yet?
I want to point out that when Mac jumps in there and says, "Jack, are you done preaching?" While Jack was talking, because you guys can probably only see like part of the live chat replay going on, while Jack was making those points, Warren or Mac was in the live chat, battling away with people in there too. So he's not just like doing this verbally, with the people in the Clubhouse room. Or sorry, I should rephrase that. No, that wasn't live at the same time, but he was here commenting on his own performance, right? But he was in here commenting on his performance. He was referring to Mac in the third person, which was kind of, I mean, most people know that I think at this point they knew he was the same person, but he kind of kept insisting that, he was talking about somebody else, or at least implying it. So it was kind of charming. But I think he was. I wouldn't be surprised because Clubhouse usually, and especially these rooms, Clubhouse does have a comment thing going at the same time, and I wouldn't be surprised if, based on kind of the way that Mac's talking about this, and given how like hostile he is to, especially to Jack Angstreich, that while anybody's talking for an extended period of time, he's not just going into the chat in the Clubhouse room and just trying to rip off, trying to tell people that he doesn't usually say shut up, although he did say shut your mouth. Atheists should shut their mouths. It'd be stuff like that, or the stuff that he'd tell me. And actually, when this went live, he was telling me, maybe it wasn't this one, maybe it was the one before, I need to accept the glory of God, or else face His wrath upon upon the judgment day. Stuff I've heard. Like, it's weird that I love it when these guys get recently converted and they talk to somebody who's got 30 fucking years in it, right? Like, he just arrived and he's like looking around and like, ooh, Christianity, look at the clean streets, and like, yeah, that's all a facade. If you've been here long enough, you know where the bodies are buried, like, don't, and then they're like, well, aren't you worried that if you give up on this, then everything will just, no, I've already been here, well past where you're at, pal. Like, like, you need to recognize that God's your savior, otherwise you'll go to hell. Yeah, people have been telling me since I was 6, right? And I stopped thinking that was literally the case when I was in my 20s, which for some people is probably way too late. Probably says a little something about my level of intelligence. But anyway, that's for later.
Be quiet.
It's not preaching. I'm giving you an argument. Right. This is
Explain it to me.
what I told you. This is what I told you the first time I ever talked to you. Right. He doesn't have an argument. So that's why I said it doesn't make sense for you to have been convinced of Christianity by Darth Dawkins. Right. Because Darth Dawkins doesn't have an argument for Christianity.
I actually disagree with Jack there. I mean, I don't disagree with his reasons for saying that. Like, based on what he's trying to lay out there, like, if Mac's trying to tell people that the reason, and I think he has told this multiple times, if he's telling people that what has converted him to Christianity and what has convinced him that God is real is Darth Dawkins' arguments, then yeah, that doesn't, I think what Angstreich's saying there, like, that doesn't make any sense because those aren't arguments. There's lots of claims there, but there's no arguments. The shift that I would make, and this is where I would kind of disagree with Jack, and it's not on the content of what he said. I think it's the reason kind of the tone of his voice, like he's kind of incredulous, like it doesn't make sense that you believe this guy, and then preface that with, you know, based on his arguments. Yeah, I agree, but that's not why he agrees with Darth Dawkins. He doesn't agree with Darth Dawkins, I don't think, because he finds the arguments compelling. He agrees with Darth because he finds Darth's position compelling, and his position is he stakes a claim on the idea that he can assert a supernatural deity responsible for the creation of absolutely everything, and then from that position he can claim that he's unassailable from most criticism, but also Darth, I don't think this would be something he would object to, any and all philosophical or theological criticisms, right? Now, theological might be pushing it a little bit, but I think he does think that, you know, if anybody else comes at him and says, I want to raise an issue that I have as a Christian, I want to raise an issue that I think that this is doctrinally wrong, or what you're just saying about grace here is wrong, or what you're saying about God's power is wrong here, whatever. I think Darth would basically tell them in a much more polite way to you know, to fuck off. That's what he would do, right? But with any of the atheists, obviously, then he just automatically thinks he has the high ground. It's the position that he's assuming. Assume the position. He's basically declaring victory in advance and then sort of using that as a justification to rhetorically ramrod people, and just insist that he's right the entire time. That can be attractive to certain people. Given their personalities, their life circumstances, what they're kind of attracted to, right? And it also kind of feels like that this guy, Darth Dawkins, if you don't understand like the circumstances behind him, it seems like he's one against many, right? So if you believe in this kind of, if you're easily suckered by a kind of numerical problem with the underdog idea, well, Darth is this one guy, this one voice in a wilderness of howling hillbillies and trolls who are all heckling him and calling him an idiot and all this kind of stuff. So maybe there's something to this guy. He's John the Baptist and everybody else is a Pharisee. Maybe that a little bit of that's going on. What's actually happening, though, is that a lot of people have known Darth Dawkins. Jack has known him longer probably than anybody else in that Clubhouse room and anyone else watching this stuff, except for maybe Hogtie and maybe Christopher Mowdy. I'm not sure. But Jack's been around for a long time, and this idea that he's somehow like this, you know, he's got his back up against the wall, against all the, he's just kicking against the pricks, is not the case. The dude has taken every opportunity that he's had over the past several years to get himself positioned on social networks, Discord, YouTube, Google Hangouts, especially when he was on Discord, and as soon as he has the ability to take some power, he will take even more so that he can abuse people with it. He'll mute, he'll kick people. It's a power trip for him, right? He's getting his dopamine kick in the most elemental way that humans can. A crude, primitive sense of justice, right? These people are bad. I'm going to punish them, and I get a little sense, you know, a little boost to my self-esteem when that happens, right? That's all Darth's doing. And as a great example of that, I'm hoping probably tomorrow I might be doing an extended coverage of Praise I Am's little adventure with Darth Dawkins. And then he had to turn around and not even 24 hours later do a video apologizing for all, after hosting Darth Dawkins on a show and then giving Darth Dawkins a bunch of control, administrative control, something that multiple people, including yours truly, warned him not to do. He did it anyway, and then Darth goes on a rampage and just starts banning people. Praise then has to come around and do a video, a kind of mea culpa, saying, yeah, I probably shouldn't have given Darth all that stuff. And while he's doing it, he's going through the banned list and finding people that are long-term watchers of his show that Darth banned. People that didn't even join the live chat. Or not necessarily the live chat, but didn't show up on the show. They didn't verbally speak. They were just putting comments in there, in the live chat, in the top chat. And, you know, Praise was surprised that these people were also not just kicked, but banned. They were on his ban list when he went into YouTube Studio. So I'll be covering that a little bit because Darth was in fine form during that particular video. But then to hear Praise making, like, sort of apologizing for it and then making a bunch of excuses for himself and for Darth while simultaneously apologizing for Darth's behavior is exquisitely stupid. So yeah, I'll probably be covering that tomorrow. That's an invitation and a warning to anyone. Like, if you don't want to see that, I don't.
Well, maybe actually, you know what, Jack? Maybe he's got a point with this Eli Ayala thing. Maybe Eli just wasn't given enough time. He does, have a life. I mean, perhaps 65 days wasn't enough to support the cornerstone of his entire theology. Do you think 65 days was enough?
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe he needs a little bit more time.
Maybe he needs a little bit more time.
Justify premise one, and they go, see premise one.
Yeah, he's a teacher, and so I teach, I'm in grad school, and I run a YouTube channel, and I can still put together something if someone requires an argument for my position.
Justify your axioms.
The Bible.
Because
The Bible, because
if the Bible's problematic, would you agree that your religion cannot offer the preconditions of intelligibility? Or if your worldview has internal contradictions, would you agree that your worldview fails?
No, I don't agree that my worldview fails because, again, we have the Bible, we have natural revelation, we have intelligibility.
Well,
Right, but I don't think that he even realizes there that we do too. Right, God has revealed that himself to all, right, according to their theology. So the fact that I can make intelligible sense out of the universe, even though I deny God, means that revelation worked for me too. I don't. This goes back, and I've had this chat with Mac. We don't really comment back and forth to each other. We used to a little bit a few months ago on Discord. But this kind of goes back to and I think I tried to explain this to him succinctly at one point, or maybe I just did it on the show, one of many of a dozen times. It doesn't follow that just because I am not explicitly acknowledging the existence of the Christian God, that somehow my intelligibility fails, right? And I think a lot of these preceptors get this. But the way they present their argument, it sounds like if you don't explicitly acknowledge their God, you don't have the ability to talk coherently, right? That used to be that was the way that a lot of these guys kind of initially would bring this up. There were a few guys that would do this kind of stuff back, 8 years ago, I think, 8 or 9 years ago, when they were kind of, they're the kind of the Psi clones, the Psi 10 Bruggencake clones, and they would sort of argue this way, and they would make these. Even Matt Slick still does it. He'll still bring up little statements like that, like blue sleeps faster than Wednesday. That's all you're saying. That doesn't make any sense because the revelation that these ding dongs are talking about applies to all people. I'm just suppressing truth and unrighteousness, the ultimate truth, which is all of this stuff comes from God. That doesn't mean that my ability to make intelligible sense out of the world that he reveals to all people, believer and unbeliever alike, breaks down. That doesn't follow. So it doesn't follow like when Darth tries to say, well, when you invoke facts, aren't you invoking God? No. And the invocation of a fact doesn't make any sense. You don't appeal to the authority of the fact. You state a fact because the fact is supposed to represent some actual, event or some actual state of affairs in the world around you, right? That's a fact, right? It corresponds to that. Now, I think in terms of like philosophy of language and stuff like that, there's different ways of saying that, which one's a truth bearer, which one's a truth maker, and all that kind of stuff. But if you're invoking anything, what actually is happening is that if somebody's trying to state one of these facts, they're invoking the authority of God, and therefore the fact holds. But that you'd be doing that automatically. If facts rely on God, then even a non-believer like myself, by stating a fact, is in a way, implicitly and inadvertently, invoking the very God that they're talking about. I don't have to believe it. I've never seen them make this successful connection between this. And Max seems to be kind of in the same thing, like, well, hey, we have intelligibility and we can account for it. No, that the idea behind the precept is that everybody has the same amount of the same intelligibility. What everybody has in common is God, which grounds it. That's how you're supposed to do that. So.
Do you think that when a Muslim says,
and all that,
wouldn't that be a problem?
wait. There's something flawed here. Why do you think when a Muslim says the same thing that they have no flaw or failing in their theology because they have the Quran? Would you accept that kind of reasoning?
No, I wouldn't, because the Muslim God admits to being a deceiver. The Muslim God is not a truth bearer.
Okay, this is when it starts getting good, right? Because now he's going to do the special pleading thing with Danny, because Danny's like, okay, and remember, he actually kind of admitted to this before. He's like, okay, well, it's revealed in the Quran that Allah is the we can just say that Allah is the foundation. God, Allah reveals the world to us, right? And now Mac is going to try to come up with these are things that he's gotten from Darth, but he's not quite as good at like blabbering about them. But I think they're just as weak either way. Christopher Mowdy, remember when Dustin Seegers would talk gobbledygook? Dustin Seegers, that's the guy. He was the kind of skinny looking guy, kind of looked like a homeless Jesus type, I think. He's the guy. He was the one I'm thinking of, if that's the guy. One of my biggest pet peeves is the fact when a person basically have the position that they believe a God or gods do not exist, based on the presented concepts, that one has to now demonstrate what would be a necessity in place of the necessity you didn't accept from them. I'm not sure I understand where you're going with that, but are you talking about like, would they even accept a necessity that you put in place of God? I think I covered that a little bit earlier, if that's where you're going with it. Okay, so if a person is presented with X and the person does not believe X to be the case, then they need to give some substitute. But if they agree and believe X to be the case, nothing is needed. Yeah, maybe. I'm still not sure where you're going with that. All right, here we go.
Therefore, the Muslim God cannot grant intelligibility.
Oh, okay, but look, we agree. Look, we agree on something, Mac. We agree that just citing their holy text isn't enough, right?
Yeah, but that's because their holy text is false. My holy text is true.
Oh, okay. So isn't that what I mean? Isn't that demonstrated though to show that their holy text is false rather than true?
How is yours? Yes, true? Because the Muslim God is one, admits to being a deceiver, and two,
sure, I'm with you here. Look at the amount of agreement. Yeah,
your holy text says the same thing.
Look, that's fine. Look,
I want to say the deceiving spirits thing too, but I want to let Danny kind of run down this. I don't want to derail it.
Yeah, look, I'm right there with you too. There's good reasons to reject the Quran, right? And you provided good reasons for why we should reject the Quran rather than accept it. Now, what are your good reasons to accept the Bible rather than deny it?
Because God revealed it. There you go.
Oh, but you see, what if a Muslim said Allah revealed the Quran? Would you accept that reasoning?
No, because he's wrong. What the hell are you like? Why the hell are you not getting this? This is very...
Yeah. Why is Danny not just accepting the fact? Like, look, the reason that we can accept this from the Bible is because the Bible is true. We can't accept it from the Quran or any of these Muslims because they're just wrong. And he's not even really even entertaining. Like Danny began this with like, wait a minute, why couldn't a believer of Islam do this exact same thing, position themselves in the exact same way that you are, Mac? And there are Muslim apologists that do. There are Muslim presuppositionalists.
No, we agree. Look, I'm just pointing out that we agree that it's not enough for them to say Allah revealed the Quran to make the Quran true, right? It's not enough.
It's not enough because the Quran is false.
No, but they're saying the Quran is true because Allah revealed it.
Yeah, and they're wrong about that. I'm not wrong
they're
about
wrong
that.
about that. It doesn't seem like good reasoning just to appeal to the fact that Allah revealed it. Wouldn't you agree with me? It looks like we're agreeing a lot.
Yeah, Allah, who by his own admission is a deceiver.
Yeah, you and I agree.
But Allah is not real. I don't understand why he's not getting this. I think that's like a little bit of nuance that he's not really getting. Like, well, Allah by his own admission is Allah's not real. I don't think maybe he doesn't want to go there, right? Like, just because the Quran says Allah is real, it doesn't mean he actually is. And besides, the way he's described in the Quran, there's these surahs in here where it sounds like Allah is just admitting to being a liar and a deceiver. Well, it just follows from that he can't possibly be real. Okay. It sounds like what you're saying is that there's this belief in a God that the scriptures are talking about, but it sounds like men are just describing something that they made up. How is that not the case for the Bible? Right? And it seems like Mac's only defense is, oh, it's just true. Let's see here. AJ writes, I think he's redoing what Jay was writing. If the theist declares that X is a necessity, I can't just disagree and state my position. I have to concede that something is a necessary in place of X. Is that right? Oh, yeah. Okay. If that's what you're saying. Yeah. And he's saying, yes, that's true. Right. Yeah. And that's that's something that's been brought up before. God, somebody did a really good job of bringing that up once. Was basically just kind of like, well, because Darth does that all the time, right? That's his thing, right? Like, well, there has to be something fundamental, and ultimate that makes all this stuff possible. In the Christian worldview, it's Jesus. What is it in your worldview? And when someone doesn't give it to him, right, that everything fails to meet that example, right? The best thing that, like, and if somebody says, well, I don't know that there is anything like that, or I'm not sure that anything like that would be necessary, Darth then just declares victory and is like, oh, well, then what you've done is committed philosophical suicide. You have to presuppose that there's something foundational to all of reality. Otherwise, what I think it's just a basic kind of fallacy at appeal to consequences. Everything just devolves into nothingness, right? Nothing's causing things to cohere in an orderly way. Without a cosmic lawgiver and lawmaker, everything can do what it wants. And it's like, I don't see how that would be the case. Also, I don't see how that's not happening anyway. Right? Like, it's presupposed by a lot of these guys, like, well, why is it the case that people just seem to get along? I don't know. But they don't always get along. Right? I think there's a lot, the notion that a lot of orderliness, we see a lot of orderliness in our day-to-day lives and in our world, I think, is a product of the way our brains work. And it's a product of the way, because our brains, I think, tend to work that way. I think there's a lot we tend to do to try to project that onto the reality around us. Look at the difference between a wild, a forest and a garden, right? Nature abhors a garden. Humans love them. Right? We'll line everything up just right, and so we'll have these planted together this way and that one over there, and the person stops tending to that garden, nature just takes over, and it's seemingly chaos. There's the way humans would do it, and then there's the way nature does it, and presumably nature is the way God does it. So, just saying.
Agree. So you and I agree that it's not enough just to say that their God revealed it, that therefore it's true.
Yeah, but God, the Bible, is a truth bearer because he's a source of intelligibility.
Oh, no, Allah is the source of intelligibility.
No, he's not, because he's a deceiver by his own admission.
I agree.
You're not a deceiver according to the Bible.
I agree with you. Look, we could just say the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And Floyd FP just mentioned that, and Dildo Backins. One of these days I'll be able to say your username and not giggle like a kid. But the Bible says God sends deception. Would that not make him a deceiver as well? Christians argue that it doesn't, and there's lots of little apologetics arguments to kind of get around that. I don't find them convincing. And actually, as even younger, when I was a kid, I had issues with those kinds of passages in the Bible. I thought they were problematic, and I didn't think that most of the explanations that ministers and preachers and apologists would give were all that convincing. They always just seemed kind of pat. But Danny's trying to keep him away. He's like, fine. Yeah, I get what you're saying. He's trying to concede this with Mac. Like, I get it. You're saying, why should we trust this? Because, so why can you not see that somebody could apply this exact rationale to the Bible? And Mac is just insisting that he's on the right path, because no, we're talking about two categorically different things. And Danny's trying to be like, we're talking about the belief stances of believers who are trying to substantiate claims about reality based on what they believe has been revealed to them in a combination of ways, in nature and through Holy Scripture. And Muslims have the tools and the same inventory to make these same claims. For Mac, he's just easily like, oh, well, no, I don't have to worry about that because I can just disregard that. I don't know if Mac has actually seen this before. I've seen it done at least twice. Once was really good. It was a Muslim apologist having a conversation at a conference table with two Christian apologists, and he's talking about Old Testament commands to the Israelites, and he's very careful because when he's talking about it, he's referring to Yahweh as Jesus. And he kind of already had established with them, you believe that God and Jesus were one, they're one and they're the same, and Jesus was with the Father since time, he's eternal as well. Yep. So he goes back and like, Jesus did this, then Jesus did this. Jesus commanded these people to be killed. Jesus commanded this to be done. Jesus commanded this to be done. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but for him, he was like, that's a bridge too far. There's no way Allah would do that. Therefore, the God that you're talking about, that contradicts with other things that he says later on. So there's something wrong with the writing, right? Parts of this are revelation, but other parts have been corrupted. And that's consistent with a lot of Muslim thought. They think that there is revelation there, especially from Judaism to Christianity, but that the Bible has been corrupted. And all I keep hearing from Christians like Mac is basically like, they don't even go that far. Like there's nothing valuable about Islam. It basically is just a kind of Satanism, right? It's not like there's some revelation there, but it's hopelessly corrupted. They're just saying it's hopelessly corrupted and false. But anyway, let's get back to where Danny's going with this, because this is going to get pretty good. And eventually Danny's going to shift his tactic just a little bit. He's going to apply what he's trying to tell Mac. He applies it, and it's good.
I'm ignoring you. I'm ignoring you just like I ignored Jack Angstrike.
Oh, it's how inconvenient.
I'm just going to turn you right down.
Since you're ignoring,
let me explain it to you three times.
Let me. Fine, you explained it, and let me talk to everyone else. You see, Mac is in trouble here, right? Because the Quranist, the Mohammedan, or however you say the Muslim,
you'll find out when you die. You'll find
out.
No.
Hold on, Mac. Just let him finish, and then you can talk. Come on, Mac. Please. Thank you.
Go ahead and finish, Mac. I thought you were ignoring me. Go ahead and finish. Did you leave? Yeah. You see, they're never going to accept the same line of reasoning that other religious believers have. They're never going to. So you could just use the parity of reasoning from Islam, and they're going to get fucked. That you and I agree, Mac, that it's not enough for the Muslim to say Allah revealed it, therefore it's true, right? You and I agree.
If Allah was the true God of the universe, it would be enough. But he's not.
Okay, so if it were true, if God, if Allah existed, then it would, Allah would exist. I mean, but look, I'm talking about the reasoning, right? The reasoning is not enough just to say that if a Muslim told you, Mac, that Allah revealed it, therefore the Quran is true, you're going to say that's a non sequitur. That does not follow, right?
Only because I know that the God of the Quran is a demonic, blasphemous God.
Demonic. Okay. Well, that's a different assertion, right? Now we're talking about some good old fashioned quasi Pentecostal stuff, where you start getting into that kind of like, it's not just that, like, I seem to recall, and if anybody knows this from any of their experiences back in the past, if you were raised in Christian churches or whatever, I suspect that the reason that some evangelical Christians got into this idea that any pagan god, or any god other than Jesus, Yahweh, had to be a demon, was because if you insisted that all those other, it was a way of getting around the uncomfortable implications of saying all those gods are made up except for mine. Right? That automatically sounds like you sound a little exposed there. You sound kind of stupid. And anybody with a decent amount of self-awareness and, would probably be like, ooh, that doesn't sound good. However, if you're good and crazy, lots of Kool-Aid, dedicated to the cause, it's even better to say, no. Those gods are real. But they're not what you think they are. They're deceiving spirits and demons, empowered by Satan to convince people that this is a viable alternative to the one true religion, which is Christianity. Therefore, you don't have to try to say this like, oh, well, okay, well, wait a minute. If somebody just comes along and says that they believe in Allah, well, how is that any different than you coming along and saying you believe in Jesus? It's kind of hard to say that if your claim is everybody's wrong but me. All your claims are imaginary. Mine is not. Mine's revelatory. It's better if you try to say, no. There's something going on there. Oh no. But what's happening there is of the devil. Ooh, I actually think that's kind of sophisticated, but it raises the stakes, right? That one way, you're an asshole, right? Because you're the only one that's right, and everyone by definition, because they disagree with you, is wrong. And so you can basically just be excused from the room. Like, okay, there's no point in talking to you. You've clearly lost the plot. Get out. But you're like, no, you're right. I believe you when you go and pray to Amaterasu, or you offer a sacrifice to Zeus or Baal or whatever. But it's a demon. And every time you do that, it's just, you're giving Satan even more power to warp your brain even further. So, and I think Mac is starting to get into that. And I'm not sure who's even, I know the new apostolic Reformation I think they're into that kind of stuff. So
right, so you're going to reject the reasoning, okay? Because you have you've investigated the nature of a law such that you can rule out that he revealed anything, okay? Now we're saying that you're saying kind of the same reasoning, that if God revealed it, therefore, or the Christian God revealed it.
Yeah, but the Muslim God doesn't guarantee intelligibility. The Christian God does. So the fact that you can even make claims, propositions, is thanks to the mind and plan of the Christian God.
Okay, so the point is that the Muslim could say the same thing, right? They could
No, he couldn't. He could say it, but
Why?
I could sprout wings and fly home. Like sure he could say that, but he'd be wrong.
Yeah, but I'm just pointing out. Do you think the reasoning is sound? If the reasoning is not sound, that means that
what matters is that I believe in the true God of the universe, and you believe in either nothing or the devil. I'm not quite sure. And
no.
You do believe in God. You just suppress the truth and unrighteousness.
I like that. I mean, even Mac is saying that with part of a grin. It's actually these guys don't seem to understand the weapon they've got there. If they just open with that, then you can just accuse everybody of being a little bit crazy, right? Because then, according to Paul, everybody is just like, no. We've all seen God, even though I don't think that's what Paul was talking about there. Paul says in Galatians that people didn't know God. And Galatians, like Romans, is not a disputed epistle, right? Historical scholars think that Paul was a guy, and he wrote those seven, probably definitely of those seven, Galatians and Romans, definitely Paul's. And in Galatians, he talks about people not having known God before, and now they do, right? Very different than what he was writing in Romans, which is interesting because Galatians came first, I believe. Galatians would have been written before, according to historical scholars. But anyway, Nadimos says 1 Corinthians 10:20, also more undisputed Pauline epistle, right? This one's attributed to Paul, and that's probably accurate. No, but the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God, and I do not want you to be participants with demons. Okay. So, God, Paul was nuts. Jesus.
Yeah, you're changing the subject for some reason. We're just in agreement that we're just in agreement that if God's he's on the phone. Okay, he's off his phone. So look, the point is that I'm just saying.
Let me pause it again here. Hogtie writes, as soon as you believe in a mind that can install beliefs in your mind, then you cannot justify any belief, even the belief that this mind is always truth revealing. Yeah, I tend to agree with that too. I have a hard. I guess I have a the difficulty that I have with that is that Christians will say things like what God reveals, and they'll talk about grace as if it is the installation of new thoughts or a changing of your heart or something to this equivalent. But then when you start comparing that, well, how is that any different than like this notion of a Cartesian demon, right? Especially when you have these passages where it talks about God giving people over to deceiving spirits. Just the implications there are kind of troubling, and then they get a little cagey about it. Then all of a sudden, it's not quite like that. I often think, I don't know too many people who are out and out monergists who believe that grace is a one-way avenue. Like you're going to get saved, and the Holy Spirit's going to change your heart, whether you want it or not, right? It's not up to you. The synergists don't like that because they kind of think it smacks of like brainwashing or whatever. But both views have kind of synergists are the ones that think that the act of grace happens in cooperation with humans, and it's a 50-50 discussion, or maybe 60-40. I don't know. But yeah, no, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they get around that. But and Max seems like the kind of guy who's early enough into things where he can say something like that confidently, like, oh, well, this is, everyone knows they just suppress the truth and unrighteousness. Okay, well, there's two things going on there. One, it might be the case that can God overpower that suppression of truth and unrighteousness, or denial of truth and unrighteousness, or whichever verb they want to use? Like, and for like kind of the people who are leaning towards the Arminian thing, no, it's up to you. You have to concede to this. You have to accept salvation, right? It's sort of like, well, there's 12 of you dangling from the side of the mountain, but we're only going to rescue the ones that cry out for help. Those of you that think like, those of you that don't say anything or are passed out, you're just gonna freeze to death up there or fall to your death.
Oh, he's going to be right back. Was the monkeypox thing like to do with the gay stuff? Is that the idea?
Yeah, they say that. Gay
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's like in mostly.
It's a good thing that Danny's not gay.
John, yeah, well, be careful there. If your wife is yelling at you to fix a fence, I please, if she can hear this, Mrs. Fapiano, I hope that I'm not driving a wedge between you and your husband. I do appreciate his support, though. I hope that helps.
Mostly found in
You
males.
that Danny is not gay, Jack?
Yeah, apparently Danny's not gay.
Wait. There's something like off about that claim.
Apparently, I'm
Apparently, O.J. Simpson is not black.
just waiting for Mac. Are you there? You were on the phone, and then you had to go.
Thank you to anyone, whoever it was that nuked those nude ones. Man, what the hell was that? It's a nude HD. Actually, that's a. Oh, thank you, John. Yeah. Oh, you can let your wife know. Yeah, I was being like porn bombed by some Russian bot, and you had to step in. I appreciate that. God, I haven't seen him come in that fast. That's weird.
I was, yeah, and then my audio didn't work very well. What's going on?
All right, Mac, here. I'm going to be a Muslim presuppositionalist. So here's what I'm saying. That it's only Allah that can ground intelligibility. Okay, Mac? Now,
no, he can't, because he admits to being the greatest of all deceivers. Therefore, no intelligibility is possible.
Yes, but the point is that you're just wrong, because Allah is a necessary precondition to have intelligibility. Wait, Mac, I didn't interrupt you. Mac, I didn't interrupt you. I won't interrupt you, okay? I won't interrupt you, Mac. You're just not going to interrupt me, okay? Mac, 1 second. So, 1 second, Mac. All right.
Mac is really trying to turn up the obnoxiousness here. That guy, sure, Romans says everyone knows God, and Galatians says they don't, but that's okay because the Bible doesn't have any contradictions, so it's perfectly harmonious. Yeah, and the weird thing is that normally you wouldn't expect that. You wouldn't expect something that weird if it's coming from this, the epistles of Paul, and they're written, I mean, as far as most scholars are concerned, they're written by the same guy. So I think the best explanation that I think I've heard about, I don't know if anybody's ever addressed the fact that they feel contradictory, right? But I don't think that when, based on what I've heard, the point that Paul is trying to make to the Romans about everyone has seen God's work and all that kind of stuff is sort of generally appealed to, and kind of, I mean, Paul's writing in the context of a Greco-Roman world, right, and a Hellenized society, even though he's in the Levant, but for writing to the Church of the Romans, even though they're Christians, they're still in a place that's loaded with gods. There are the gods all over the place. Like everybody worships something, right, for the most part. And so the idea that there's this sort of instinct for people to gravitate towards the existence of supernatural beings as being responsible for the creation of our world and bestowing blessings and meting out punishments and things like this. It's just obvious, right? That's kind of how I take it. I think it's only relatively recently, and I don't know like kind of how it's been. I think apologetics has made it worse. The idea of converting what Paul is saying into the side where they suppress the truth and unrighteousness into sort of this Freudian thing, where there's this denial going on. That's a trauma kind of thing. It's caused by sin, and you just don't want to admit to it. And if we can work through that, and we can have that goodwill hunting moment at the end, then we can get you to have a good cry, and then you'll love Jesus, and then everything will work out, right? I really do think that for a lot of Christians, that's part of the take, right? That was kind of my understanding of it when I was a teenager and a believer. Was I tended to kind of gravitate towards that because that seemed to be, anytime that was appealed to in a sermon by any pastor that I'd ever heard, in any church that I went to, that was sort of their take, right? It's the Sid nature that suppresses us. And they would describe it often in the language of kind of pop psychology. And so I think it just kind of took on that meaning, even though I don't think that's what Paul's talking about. I don't, maybe Paul was a time traveler and had access to Freud, but I kind of doubt it. Hey, Michael, how you doing?
So the point is that you need Allah to even think about the fact that Allah might be a deceiver, might not be a deceiver. So he's still the precursor to intelligibility.
If that's true, then why did he mischaracterize the Trinity in the Quran?
I'm just saying that he's a necessary precondition for intelligibility.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think this is interesting because where Danny's going with this is pretty good, right? He's trying to say he's the necessary precondition for intelligibility. Mac's trying to get into like, aha, but in the Quran, it's saying like, oh, this is wrong and this is wrong. I'm going to nitpick these kinds of things. This is exactly the kind of stuff they don't accept from skeptics, though, right? Does it follow from an inconsistency in the Quran that the God Allah cannot exist? How does that follow, right? It doesn't follow that inconsistencies and contradictions in the Bible cause God to not be the case. That's not the reason why they would be pointed out, right? In fact, I hope no one gets the impression that if I'm pointing out contradictions in the Bible, that's not what I'm trying to do. The problem is for the biblicists, the fundamentalists that believe in the inerrancy of the Bible as a theological tact. For them, that's where they're kind of resting that fight. But that's not the issue for me. Like the fact that there are inaccuracies in different biblical accounts, or there's different genres, there's different writers, there's different emphases, different motives behind some of these kinds of things. Hell, different Christologies in the New Testament, right? Christ the victor, Christ the ransom, Christ the the atonement, the substitutional atonement. All these different kinds of different aspects of these kinds of things theologically. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is no God, no kind of ultimate being or whatever. It just means that there are probably inconsistencies with these narratives, that they're not infallible or inerrant. And that, I think, is necessary at least to kind of break down. The fact that Mac is going for this is an example of how inconsistent these guys are. They're capable of understanding when they're defending their own set of scriptures that this doesn't work. But now that Danny is attempting to say, hey, from their perspective, from this perspective of this other believer who just insists that Allah is the necessary precondition for intelligibility, what are you going to say to me about that, right? For Mac to then go after well, this surah doesn't line up with that surah, or this surah says that Allah is this way and that's bad, or that's obviously not good, or any of that kind of stuff. That's not going to work.
So for you even to ask the question is presupposing a law.
He can't be the source of intelligibility if he's constantly spouting random shit.
Look, for you to even...
Okay, so if he can't be the source of intelligibility if he's spouting random shit, how are we to believe then claims from Christians that God is an immutable God when we have passages in the Old Testament that talk about Moses changing his mind, influencing his thoughts? That sounds like nonsense. How can God change his mind, right? And if all that is just some illustrative story where God is sort of allowing Moses to think that what Moses is saying is having some kind of influence on God's decision-making process to make Moses feel better, God was going to make the right call anyway? That sounds like nonsense too. So nonsense is in the eye of the beholder there. So
have a thought or question me, right? You need to have a law in order to put together those thoughts. God grounds your intelligibility in your logic, so you're presupposing him right now.
Well, no, because there can be no truth under a law if we're to accept.
Look, the second that you start talking, you are presupposing a law in order to be able to form.
You're engaging in what's called a worldview body double, and I don't engage in worldview body double.
Look, really pathetic.
The point is that the second
as Mr. Batman.
The worldview body double. He's finally deployed that. Finally. That's not really the case, though. He's missing Danny's point still.
Uttering. The second that you start thinking and reasoning and asking me questions, you're presupposing Allah, because Allah,
like words coming out of your pie hole, but because you have no grounds for intelligibility, they're just gibberish.
No, look, you understand that the second that you try to form any cogent thought against Allah, you need to presuppose Allah, since Allah is the precondition for intelligibility.
I think it's charming that Mac just now tried with seemingly no self-awareness at all, just tried to do to Danny what Danny has been doing rhetorically to him for the past 3 minutes. It's amazing. Even if Allah admits to fibbing, that doesn't logically exclude the possibility that Allah is the source of all revelation and intelligibility. Right. I agree with you, Hogtie. But Mac, who's been, deep-throating Darth Dawkins' delusional dogma, they would say it can't be. If God can lie, then intelligibility breaks down. This gets into, Tom Rabbit was having these arguments, but 10 months ago, I think, on this whole thing, trying to say, with J. Robin mostly, right? Like intelligibility, supposedly revelational epistemology, I guess, explodes if the thing that does the revealing can lie once. You know, it is what it is. So, I mean, I don't get it, but I tend to agree with you. Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense that, like, this God can't be the source of all intelligibility and revelation, even if it chooses to lie, right? But, you know, what do I know? I'm not a Christian. I don't have that Holy Spirit in me anymore, or ever before. I don't know. Now Mac is going to end up like DD from dealing with all those foaming at the mouth atheists. He's going to develop some trigger to atheists. Yeah, I mean, the next step is for him to start trying to take over other people's YouTube channels and stuff, get as much admin power as he can, and then just start blocking those people from, from the channel that's not his.
So the fact that you just even open your mouth, the fact that you just open your mouth
can't be. You did not give reasons why the God of the Bible cannot be.
Look, I'm just saying that Allah is the necessary precondition because Allah revealed it.
You're not even responding to what I'm saying, so have a nice
okay.
day.
Well, Allah just revealed to the fact that in order for you to have a cogent thought.
Okay, I'm turning you down. I'm turning you down.
Yeah, okay. That's how y'all sound like.
On this.
Geez, Mag. Man, this is bad. Wow. That guy, psychological self-deception, you mean, as opposed to the other kind of self-deception? Yes. Maybe. I do believe Michael is a trigger for Darth. Yeah, he seems to be now. It's interesting.
Platform.
I can respond to you, Mac.
See how Islam presuppositional apologetics shuts the mouth of the Christian?
I would disagree.
This
is what they do.
No, I've come up with reasons why Allah can't be.
For you to reason, that's to presuppose Allah. For you to reason, that presupposes Allah, Mac. Yeah, I'm just saying that in order for you to reason, you're reasoning about Allah right now that presupposes Allah. So it doesn't make sense to even reason against Allah, since Allah is a precondition for that reasoning.
Yeah, and if Allah is the true God, you'd be correct. If Allah was the true God, you'd be correct, but you're not, because he's not.
Well, he is, because he...
No, he is, because he's revealed, and the only way that you could say that in the first place is is because he allows for that intelligibility. I don't know why Mac... I thought Mac got this.
Revealed it. Okay. He is the true God because he revealed it.
He's not because he's not.
Okay.
Yeah, you see, Muslim precept shuts the mouth of the Christian, guys. You see, Mac is rendered not only can't respond to the argument, but Allah is messing with his audio right now.
Wow.
Praise Allah. Praise
Inshallah.
him.
Inshallah.
So
easy to get out of a
So if we're to presuppose Allah, and then we're to then Allah gives this message in the Quran, even though the Quran actually confirms the Torah, it confirms Psalms, it confirms the Gospel, which contradicts what they say, then who do we believe at that point?
Well, for you to reason about the Torah and the Quran and the Bible, that is a precursor for that reasoning is Allah.
So the Pentateuch predates the Quran, correct?
Look, the second they...
This gets kind of weird. I think that's Matt Adams talking. Is it Matt Adams, or is it... Yeah, I think it is Matt Adams. Jay writes, well, after listening to what Knock was covering from Praise, it was like Praise was telling everyone that Dede had developed some psychological condition due to atheists. Yeah. Knock, for anybody that isn't familiar, that's Raging Atheist. Raging Atheist covered Praise I Am's follow-up video. After having Darth on the previous night, he did a follow-up video basically talking about, well, Darth abused some people and kicked a bunch of people and banned a bunch of people and muted a bunch of people, and maybe I shouldn't have given him all the administrative powers that I gave him, because he kind of ran roughshod over a bunch of people that he probably shouldn't have, like, well, killed Surprise. That's what he does. In fact, I'll end up mentioning this again. I was in the live chat when that happened. I'm like, you're making a mistake granting Darth Dawkins administrative power, and if you doubt me, just ask your buddy One Way, because One Way, a couple years ago, maybe even 3 years ago at this point, it was a while ago, one night I went over to the Reformation server on Discord to find it completely abandoned, and there were only 3 people hanging out in the live chat. One of them was One Way, and he was getting his Guinness on, and he politely pointed out to me that he just decided to run down what Darth does, and Darth would get all the mod powers that he could get, and if he had some limitations, he would bitch and moan until he had. It was never enough that he had the ability to kick people from his own channel. He would always push eventually, because he would end up moving from his own channel into other channels when he would get bored. He wanted server mod powers. He wanted to be able to server kick and server mute and server ban people like any of the owners of the channel. And when people were silly enough to do that, he would hollow out their viewership, right? He would do it repeatedly, and he would kick too many people. It would often leave people in a position where the only way they could get back into that server would be to request, they'd have to know a mod that they could direct message in order to get back in there. And he would do it to newer people and stuff that didn't know exactly how to do that. So he just hollowed out the channel, just left it a graveyard, right? And he hasn't learned his lesson, because as soon as Praise did this, he was behaving as if he was on Discord, server muting people, server banning people, just fucking nuts. So he's gone insane. That's fun. Did Danny ever have a conversation with Darth? Danny has had some short conversations with Darth, but I don't know that they've ever had like an extended one-on-one conversation. Yeah, that'd be interesting to find out. I think they've been in groups like that, like in Clubhouse and stuff, where Darth's been there and Danny's been around. But I think Danny gets kicked quite frequently, because enough people have. I'm sure Darth keeps notes on everybody, and he knows who's got the credentials and who doesn't. So, yeah.
You open your mouth, you're presupposing a law, Matt.
So the Pentateuch presupposes the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Audio. What's making all this noise?
They claim to exist. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
So if it's confirming the Torah, the Pentateuch, the Psalms, and the Gospel, and I go read.
Tom Rabbit's new video premieres in 10 minutes. Well, I better wrap this up quick then.
The Psalms and the Gospels, and I see a contradiction between what the Quran says. At this point, who am I to believe?
The problem is that the second that you try to reason about these things, you're presupposing a law in order to reason that
I
anything.
I'd actually be presupposing Yahweh.
No, you are presupposing a law, given that a law is the precondition.
The Pentateuch, which predates the Quran. So I'm actually having to presuppose Yahweh at that point, right? Because that's what the Quran's doing. The Quran is presupposing the God of the Pentateuch, which is Yahweh. But then it contradicts with the Pentateuch. It contradicts with the Gospel. So
if we,
what do I do at that point?
If we find a contradiction in one of the books, we should reject that book then?
Correct.
Okay, so if we can just point some contradictions out in the Bible,
so, well, hold on.
There's no need to presuppose.
Are you saying? Are you agreeing that the Quran has contradicted itself already, because this is actually affirmed?
For you to arrive at the idea, look for.
This is kind of Danny's just going to keep insisting on this. He keeps playing this like no, you have to assume Allah is the. But I think what's interesting that Matt's trying to do here is like no. What's inconsistent about this is the Pentateuch predates the Quran, sure. Right. And then so they're getting things wrong about it. Well, of course they would, because it's not like the Pentateuch existed in a way like you can just go to the bookstore and grab a copy of the Pentateuch. Like I love how he's talking about this. Like, oh, well, they had access to it. How'd they get it wrong? Well, I don't know. How do different Christian denominations get different doctrinal things wrong? Right. The simple fact of the matter is, in Islam, my general, very, 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 very general understanding of it is that they believe that is revelation, but that there are flaws in it. So if they believe that, then there are going to be things that they say in the Quran about Judaism and Christianity that will necessarily contradict what's written down in the Pentateuch. That follows from their claim. This is part of a revelational tradition from the people of the book, going back to Abraham and Moses and then Jesus and then Muhammad. And this is all part of Allah's plan. But there are errors. There are problems with this, right? So whatever Matt is trying to do here, he's actually helping make that point. And like, oh, well, if there's an inconsistency between what the Quran says about the Pentateuch, then that's evidence right there that if they couldn't get it right, then we just throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, their whole point is that the Pentateuch is wrong. So of course they're going to contradict it.
For Matt, for you to arrive at the idea of a contradiction, you have to presuppose a law.
Okay, so if I presuppose Allah, and Allah, there's supposed to be no contradictions, so then Allah affirms the Pentateuch.
So you believe in God. You just accept, if you presuppose Allah, if you just did, then voila, my precept just works. You
So
now
then
are.
we have a contradiction then, right? Because the Pentateuch predates the Quran, and the Pentateuch is actually affirming Yahweh, the God of Abraham.
Yeah, so all we have to do is show a
So if I
precept.
listen to the Quran, I have to believe in Yahweh. I have to reject the Quran. So it ends up being an internal contradiction at that point.
Yeah, so all we have to do
And
is show a
then
contradiction in a
there's
book.
then there's actually more. So then what I could actually say, okay, well, according to the Pentateuch, there's laws and regulations established by Yahweh that people are to observe. A prophet is going to affirm those laws. He's not going to deny those laws.
Okay, unless the previous people that wrote down what the other prophets were doing got some of their actions wrong or got their message wrong, then the new revelation, that I don't understand why Matt has a problem with this, that they believe that, like, okay, so Judaism gets this part of the revelation, but then Jesus comes along and delivers a little bit more revelation, so there's more to come, and then Muhammad has another revelation, right? So, but they don't believe in this, like, Matt is kind of projecting onto this, like, well, no, it's always going to be perfect. It's it's perfect in every step, and it's just added. That what they believe is it just gets added on. No, I don't think that's necessarily what's part of the Muslim tradition. The idea is like, yeah, there's a revelation here, but over time things get corrupted and things get mistranslated or get lost in translation or lost in transmission. Christianity has the same problems here. This is the most recent. This is the most recent revelation. Is coming from Muhammad. So. And it attempts to not only say, okay, this is how things are, but maybe even occasionally correct the record. The contradictions are part of the point. And yet Matt is still missing the plot of what Danny's doing with, when Danny's trying to get into the, like, look, they can just come at you and say, hey, you're presupposing the existence of Allah because Allah is the grounding for all intelligibility. Just you thinking that there's contradictions in Islam is something that Allah enables you to do. So there's your proof for Allah and the truth of Islam right there.
So then in the Quran, we have, later on in the Quran, we have where Muhammad decides that he's actually going to marry his adopted son-in-law's wife after they divorce, which actually is, you can't do that according to Leviticus chapter 18 and other passages. So then we have a prophet who's actually denying the authority of Scripture here, which is kind of taking away from his claim to be a prophet to begin with. Then in Quran chapter 4, we have Muhammad actually affirming the people of the book, the Pentateuch, the Jews, and he's actually affirming the people of the gospel, and that this is a guiding light to them. So then we're actually, if it's a guiding light to us and the Quran is true, then we have to be Christians. I have to be a Christian. I have to remain a Christian based on the Quran itself.
No, you're supposed to accept the fact that you're part of a chain of revelation. I think you're meant to accept the Quran because it's the latest revelation. I don't know where Matt's getting this, and I don't know what this has to do with what Danny was trying to lay out. So I think at this point we've pretty much exhausted what we can learn from this, and I think I'm going to get off this before. Well, I got 3 minutes left. Let's see where this goes here.
What if we find contradictions in the Old Testament or the New Testament?
Do y'all agree with what I just said?
Yeah, but we just have to find contradictions then in the Old Testament or the New Testament, right? And then we have reasons to reject that too.
Yeah, I
and
think
we should reject all of them.
So we can later rest the Quran now, right?
That wasn't the point of why he was
Yeah,
he was talking about the
to
Quran.
clarify, we can lay to rest the Quran.
Because I could just pull the Darth.
No, you don't need to lay to rest the Quran. You can. I mean, this is so weird, right? Like, there's still a tradition there. Even before the Quran was written down, it was being recited verbally, right? The idea that, oh, well, we can just sync that because I can point out that it contradicts itself in some way, shape, or form with other texts from other religious traditions because it mentions them. Right, so we'll just kick that out. I don't think that Matt understands enough about Islam to know how sophisticated some of the apologetics are within Islam about those kinds of accusations. This idea that he's just like, oh, well, you know what, or even Max trying to do, like, oh, well, Allah described himself as a deceiver and a liar, so therefore, that's it. Oh, really? That's it, huh? There's no apologetics out there in the Muslim world that kind of explain why that's working the way it is. And yeah, this is all bonkers. Jay writes, do you think Mac realizes that based on the narrative found in the OT, those people presupposed their God to exist before they wrote their scriptures supporting that belief? Yeah. I don't think that he realized. I don't think he has like any kind of sophisticated understanding of what the Bible represents as a collection of books or as faith tradition or any of that kind of stuff. I really don't. I think he just, yeah, I think he's just going down the fundy path. Well, folks, I don't know where else this leads to at this point. I think this just kind of just
You
goes
could just
back
pull
and
the Darth
forth.
argument and say, oh, you're wielding the law of non-contradiction right against the Quran, but to even assume the law of non-contradiction, you have to already presuppose a law. That's the point of bringing up the Quran.
Then there's another.
That Darth's argument is useless because you can plug anything in there and just say, oh, well, that thing is the reason we have the laws of logic, for example, right? So
Yeah, but I can't find anything.
you're moving to the actual book. Yeah, you're moving to the actual book.
In the Quran that says that the laws of logic are dependent upon Allah.
Yeah, Matt's, yeah, okay. I don't know. I don't think I've ever talked to Matt, but I'm not real impressed with where he's going with that, because that just seems like it just seems like a waste of time. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I think Danny made his point. He showed like how it was done. Like this is how you can just deploy presuppositionalism. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. Tom Rabbit is gonna be going live here any second now, so I'm probably already stepping on the toes of that premiere anyway. Thank you everybody for showing up. I appreciate the always entertaining live chat. I might be doing one of these later on tonight as well, because I don't really have much going on. So depending on what I can get prepared in advance, there's a Darth video that I want to cover, and then there's the Praise I Am stuff that I might be covering as well. So keep an eye out for that. Other than that, if you don't see me later tonight, I will probably definitely be doing one of these tomorrow, early afternoonish. So thanks as always. I appreciate you guys' support. Love your comments. Like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. And until next time, I will see you all later.